So to answer your question, Stephanie, and this part of this is you've heard already, you and Justin, when we first talked, but I'll just provide a bit of background maybe for Stephen and for Kartik. So I work for IX, and I'm on loan to GTS as a chief architect in Canada at two accounts, Celestica and WSIB. And so Celestica is a data center, is a data center rehosting. So we won the work from the data center hosting and operations work from CGI, and that's being moved over to IBM data centers in Markham and Montreal and Viga. And so related to that is a migration of approximately just over 1,000 workloads, which are all virtualized, Windows, Linux, and AIX on LPARs. And so we have our cloud modernization and migration team have been working on this for probably the past 18 months, I would say. So I came into this project in May last year. And one of the challenges I would say that we have here is the information that's been shared with us from the client has been fairly limited. Plus, the current incumbent CGI have not exactly been forthcoming or helpful. They've lost the work. It's being moved over to us, to IBM. We won the work, but it's definitely a process which is fraught with challenges as well. So one of the tools which is being used, and I have third-hand experience of this, I haven't actually set it up myself, so Cloudscape. And Cloudscape is a tool which our CMM team are running, and they actually had to have CGI perform the installation for this, and there are some challenges with that as well. Cloudscape tool's running. It's installed on the majority of the workloads. I can't say if it's installed on all of them. So one of the things that's doing is collecting, first of all, information about whatever the heck it can glean from the particular virtual machine that it's sitting on. Oh, I can see this is Windows 2008, Service Pack whatever, Service Pack 3 or something, or Service Pack 5, and I can see I've got Microsoft SQL Server on this, and I've got some management agents, and I can see how many cores I have and how much memory, and so many access to so many shared storage devices in terms of disk drives. And I can see that I've got some form of applications running here. Maybe it's IIS, maybe it's a Java application or native.NET or something like that. So it's picking up some degree of information from that. I say some. It also, the Cloudscape tool is being used to help provide a point of view in terms of which VLANs are being used to support which applications, and also the relationship between IPs there. So in other words, the idea that coming out of that, the idea should be that, if we pull this particular group of applications and lift them and shift them, so we migrate them, based on our analysis, we can see these VLANs are involved. So if we move all of those VLANs, everything which talks to everything else should actually also be moving. So that's an example of one of the migrations which we're doing. You wanted to say something, Stephanie?
Oh, I just wanted to ask just to make sure I understand. So Cloudscape is helping you to figure out what the current configuration is?
Cloudscape gives us current configuration, and also it's being used to provide some of the network relationship information.
Okay.
I do not know how much manual assembly is occurring with that information.
I see.
This is a black box to me.
And the project involves, does it involve, you said lift and shift, so is it trying to not change any functionality and just make it work in
Correct.
a new environment?
Yep. Yep.
Okay.
Yeah. Because normally it's considered a giant anti-pattern if you attempt to move an application, and as part of the move, you actually attempt to make changes to it. Because
Mhm.
now when it gets to the other end, if, hey, this doesn't work as expected, it's
Yeah.
running slow. Never have I heard anyone complaining it's running too fast. It's
Yeah.
always runs too slow is one of the challenges. And of
Okay.
course, when that happens, we have things such as, well, how fast did it run over there?
Mm.
And I've been in the situation where I've been begging to have those types of baselines
Mm.
created, and we have not done it for all sorts of reasons.
Mm-hmm.
My lunch was too warm that day, my coffee's empty. It just seems,
Yeah.
wow, invest a couple of days to
I
generate a
see.
baseline, because you know that we're going to get hit with this at some point. It always seems
And
to happen.
I feel that
Performance.
you're reminding us that the work is not just, is that there's a human element to the work, a team. You're relying on people at the client or people who were previously working on it to help, and that sometimes doesn't go well. So it's not all a tools issue, basically.
Or yes, yeah, or we have the tools, but it's hard to find people who can set the tools up in
Mm.
an efficient and correct way, and so they only have so much time, and you've got them for a limited period of time, and then they're gone on to their next thing. So
Ah,
the auto, so the when we were discussing about workload migrations and modernization and those types of things, and the reason I was thinking, if you're looking at sort of AI related
mhm.
things,
Yeah.
when the cloudscape or whatever tool is running
Hmm.
across the customer network, it would be rather useful if we had something which could give us a higher degree of certainty and cleverness in terms of the network traffic which is being seen, and make some recommendations around that. And this is the piece where I describe in terms of, I do not have visibility in terms of just how clever the Cloudscape tool is. I understand it's not amazingly clever, but it has some degree of smarts in.
Hmm.
And so that would in and so if we had a better way of working out, so it's more than just IP addresses, but also
Hmm.
things like, say, protocols. Wow, I can see a lot of, say, Oracle SQLnet queries all going to these two servers, or I can see lots of MS SQL queries going over the network to a server over here. But
Hmm.
my official registry of applications doesn't tell me there's a database there, but all the evidence points to the fact that there is one there. Maybe my tooling could then say, hey, we think there's evidence that there's a database here. You should go back and say to the client, please confirm which database is running on this machine, because we see evidence to that.
I see.
And
So,
they're either going to come back and say, oh, good point. Yep, you're right. There's actually an Oracle database there and a SQL database there. Thank you very much. Or, they say, no, there isn't, in which case our team would want to explicitly describe those particular affected service as, where there's no database here, we're not moving a database, be it on your own head. So we've asked you, warned you, and you've said no. So if anything happens in terms of a bad experience, be aware we did due diligence.
I see. So to help with the contractual arrangement. Um, so it sounds like a more ideal tool um, would tell you the things it's sure of, but also some things it thinks are possibilities based on some evidence, so that you could work with that. Is that the sort of,
Yeah. Yep.
because that would be significant information to use in this, because it's a client relationship. And And also, we've been told by other people that, sometimes people forget kind of things about their system.
Oh, that's part of our challenge now, is that
Yeah.
the client has a limited number of people who are supporting
Mhm.
these applications.
Yeah.
Depending on who you talk to, they may not even know how to make changes to those applications because some of them are in-house. I've come across, I go back, say, 15 years or so, there was a Calgary-based client who had lost their source code.
Oh.
So they no longer knew how to build this important messaging application, because
Mm.
each time they tried to build it, they ended up with an executable which was a different size compared to what they had running in production.
Wow, that sounds like a difficult situation to be in.
Well, it
And
does, but I'd at that time I'd said, so why don't you test that to see if it behaves as your production one, and if it
Mhm.
does, then great. If it doesn't, part of your testing. And that did not go well because no one had the funding to invest in terms of adding 3 or 4 weeks of testing.
Mhm.
So we might even come up with reasonable strategies as well, but
Mhm.
can run into roadblockers in terms of
Mm.
maybe just the client people on the ground just don't have time
Right.
to support.
I see. So as much as could be done in a sort of here, as much as could be done through a quickly set up tool that gave you a better picture than you're getting with this tool, the better, it sounds like.
Yeah, and it could be run over many months. I mean,
Okay.
some of this stuff has been running for probably a year, I would say, in one case.
I see.
So, pick
I
it up
see.
and learn from it. We're still not
Mhm.
sure if we're being told the truth for
Right.
this one
No.
customer. Yeah, because we don't know if our friends from CGI are giving us all the information which they're asked
Mhm.
for or not.
Mhm.
And
That
periodically
sounds
questions come, I wonder if we really know or not.
right. So having some kind of real technical reckoning or analysis would really help in this situation to more accurate information that could be automatically collected would help in this type of situation.
Yeah, and it's volume stuff as well. And when I say
Yes.
volume stuff, it's
Yeah,
information going from one route to the other, those types of things. As I said, the
right.
flow over VLANs, the flow over
Hmm.
IPs, those pieces. I think I heard a
Right.
question from someone.
Uh,
yes, this is Karthik. Hi, Justin. So I had a question on the part where you were talking about if the tool could suggest, for example, the example with the database that you were talking about, and it said that, hey, look, it looks based on the context or based on the evidence that's there, there might be a database. Can you tell us more about it? In your opinion, um, what is the level of patience or the level of a problem with a lot of especially AI based recommendation tools is when they get one or two things wrong, even if they get 9 out of 10 things right, users tend to trust them less, and users tend to not take as much, like they don't like being interrupted after a tool has shown itself to be wrong, even if it's just like 10% of the time. So in your experience, is that likely to be the case in this scenario as well?
Good question. Uh, hmm.
And yeah, I understand this might be a really abstract question, so feel free to move forward and we can come back to this. But I think one of the issues for us is from what you're describing, it really sounds like, and correct me here if I'm wrong too, it really sounds like what we would be doing is we would be doing more of a classification task, right? Where we're saying that, here are all the telltale signs of something that is present, but we are not being told about. And so, there are certain situations where there's enough evidence that we classify and say, yes, we actually need to alert the user and ask them, is there some part of the code that's missing, or is there some component that is not documented here? If that is true, then it is likely also that the AI system will not be 100% right all the time. And so that's kind of why my question.
But that may be something which comes out in terms of the manner in which the AI report or information is delivered.
Yes, that is also possible. So the follow on I was going to ask was, there are cases where you can directly have the AI system alert the client who is using this, or you can go through one of the, one of, let's say, your professionals who is helping the client make the transition, let's say, right? And then so the AI system really is more of an alert system for the human on our side. Let's say we go in as IBM or as some other company that is
That's
helping
definitely
a
how I
client.
do it. Yeah, it
Yes,
goes in
yes,
with an IBM team.
correct.
The tooling compiles the information,
Correct.
performs the analysis,
Yes,
and then the IBM team, and maybe the team is just one person,
right.
they look at that and they say, okay, there's the 80-20 thing. This 80% here, we're all good. We're gonna go with that. But now there's a 20% of uncertainty. Okay, that's not too bad, because I'm not looking at it a 20% of uncertainty. I'm looking at it at a, hey, for the majority of these workloads, we believe we have a good understanding. That's the 80% piece. So to your point, if the AI tool is 10% wrong, well, what about the other 90% of the time when it's right? How does that compare to not doing these things with
Right, right. And I
clever
guess,
tooling?
yeah, and I guess what I was asking was, is that a fair understanding, or is there actually a higher barrier for an AI tool, basically? That, would a human who is using this, let's say from the IBM side, would they give the AI tool that level of, commission and be like, it's fine if it gets it wrong, or are the expectations automatically sky high because it's an AI tool?
I would say part of it is, okay, I'm going to throw it back to you. I would say part of it would be the way in which the tooling is being delivered. So
I
if the
see.
tooling is acting in an advisory category, hey, run the tooling, and the tooling will provide, a rich list of everything which it could find, and then it's going to provide some insight into that. It's up to you, workload migration team, to do your human thing, and then apply your best judgment on top of that, and determine how you're going to use this. So that's the thing I would do. And I think the other one I would do as well is, we seem to have a hard time, or at least in my experience, providing both of the clients who have been running into this with much in the way of prior experience in terms of what worked well and what didn't work well. And so we have, people will say, it'd be kind of a part of that experience is more of a sort of a general type of thing. Yeah, we did it like this in some of our other projects. Okay, how many? 3 projects, 10 projects? How close was it? How different was it? So, if there was some way to also load such information in a manner in which it could be leveraged by each of future projects coming along to build up some form of a standard set of patterns, that in theory would then help any tooling and cleverness on that to be even better. Of course, now you've got to be absolutely certain that you're not pulling out client confidential information.
Okay. Stephanie, you're on mute, I think.
No, I was just being reminded there of the client relationship situation with sensitive information, and trust of such tools is probably also an issue.
Yeah, definitely. And it's getting more so, I would say.
Like if someone's going to allow you to install something on their system that will sit and watch it over a period of time, they will have some concerns. And so you were saying there are 2 clients in a similar situation?
That's one. And the
Okay.
other one, which we're just starting off, we're just looking at migration. We've got, not sure it's 100 or 150 workloads to be moved. There's some AIX in there. There are some Windows and a small amount of Linux.
Mhm.
A lot of the Windows is fairly old, some of it going back to 2008. And we're just starting on that one now. We just started scratching our heads last week. Oh, okay, so we've got this request come in. Okay, what are we going to do? What are we going to think about there? So that one is just starting up. Interesting, I'm looking at the information which has been gathered from whatever existing tooling the account is using at the moment, and I don't have insight into that. And that is the type of thing, it's another 75% of it appears to be consistent, but then I've got blank spaces and I've got, I can see where information has been moved around and it's in the wrong place. And well, that's obviously not a person's name because it says dev/QA. I'm pretty sure it's not the person's name. That should probably be in that field next to it, which is environment type, where it lists production, non-production. So in that case, whatever mechanism we were using there is not necessarily filling in all of the information which we are collecting. And why is that? Was it incorrectly configured? Was there a problem with the whatever the extract process was? Is this, it's been moved from one Excel to another Excel to another Excel type of thing? Once again, this is something I can't tell. I don't have line of sight into how that's being collected. But it does look like the type of thing where you'd be saying, well, where's my data cleansing? How am I verifying that fields have the appropriate types of information in here? What's missing is a standard data model, which we use everywhere for supporting modernization and migration. Because if everyone used one data model, then we could build things on top of that data model to make sure that only the right types of information go into a particular field.
I see. So it sounds like one of the biggest pain points is this beginning process where you're trying to gather the information, but there's a number of problems with gathering it accurately, some of them having to do with people things and not even technical things. Once you get past that point, what's the next step in your process? As in your role is architect, is that?
I'm chief architect.
Chief architect. So in your role, what's the next step in that process?
My next step is to basically set up a series of reviews with the various IBM teams involved to figure out, are they answering the right types of questions? What type of critical thinking are they applying? I mean, I'm spread thin, so I get 50% of my time at each client. So I do not, unfortunately, have the luxury to go down and own a problem down into low-level detail.
Right.
So I'm either setting standards, reviewing, looking at what's been proposed and saying, yeah, that seems reasonable, or no, I think we need to do something here because otherwise I can see these types of things occurring. So in terms of the workload migration, that's literally what I'm going to be doing here. I will not be down in the weeds, but I'll be asking questions such as, well, we should be giving the client, say, an overview of the important workloads which are here. Where's that captured? Help me to understand the impact. How many of those are prod? How many of those are non-prod? Oh, we don't know? Then I believe we should have an understanding of that, because that could set a very different tone. If this is all non-prod workload, then hey, maybe it's a little bit easier to move. Where if it's all prod workload, now we've got outages. Now we have to make sure that we've got to do even better and even more. Whereas with the non-prod workloads, we might have a little bit of leeway if necessary.
So I see. So you're using your experience doing this in lots of other contexts to ask questions that that bring out things which need to be thought of for doing the actual migration.
Correct. Yeah.
And so can you imagine any sort of help with that? That, like, if you were to imagine your dream AI tool with that part of the process, there must be a part that you like doing but would like some help with the other part or something.
For me, probably the biggest problem I find is this sort of the data churning. I've got a spreadsheet. It's got
Okay.
about 25 tabs in it. I
Ah,
mostly just trust it. I built some pivot tables in it this weekend to try and pull some information out, and I killed a couple of my pivot tables. So being able to pull out useful information from that would be dead handy. And when I say useful information, you might have a row which talks about a particular virtual machine. It would have, say, the operating system types and things like that in. But also in that row, it might provide some kind of classification in terms of application server, database server, or blank. And then typically there's some comment fields in there which come from, I don't know where, but someone may have typed it in, which might say, this is a NetWeaver database server. Oh, if it's NetWeaver, I know that's actually related to SAP. Or this is an application server for ECC. Oh, I know that's an SAP application server. Or this is a Lotus Notes server, because there's a few in there saying that as well. Okay, so any ability to pull that information together for the entire tracking spreadsheet, because all of the migration projects have to solve this same problem. And I've seen varying degrees of spreadsheets as well. The ability to say, right, I looked at your spreadsheet and I can count, say 200 unique virtual machines. And I can count that spread across those 200 unique virtual machines, there are 50 or 60 applications, because like a clever tool, I'm grouping some of those together because I can see, hey, there's a whole pile of SAP here. And from the information in the sheet, I can tell that, they're all related. And so instead of saying, you've got, say, 10 or 15 SAP machines here, I'm going to say there's an SAP application and it's made up of 15 servers. That's literally one of the things I'm trying to do at the moment. That would be very, very handy.
Yeah, it sounds like a lot of information. And sort of following up on sort of the theme of Kartik's question, if you had help with that, but it wasn't always perfect, what would that be like?
Better than what I have now, because I would use that type of thing to get me moving. And the key thing, I think, just from tooling is if it just gives me some indication of where does it feel concrete and where does it feel less concrete. And on the one hand, you could say, wow, our tool will have 150 fields, which you can use to configure it with. The downside is that's 150 fields, and most people get annoyed when you ask someone to do configuration of 2 or 3 fields. So, and that's where maybe heuristic information might come from. What have I learned previously? Hey, this looks familiar. I've seen this type of thing many times.
And in terms of, and Justin, in terms of your current process, right, that you use, my ears perked up when you said, the Excel sheet and all the pivot tables and all of that, right? So what exactly is instrumented / what kind of data or knowledge are you gathering right now in terms of the current process that you go through? Because anything that let's say the AI tool would need to use in order to fine tune itself to your particular use case or scenario, we'd have to start with that information. So is there any instrumentation right now, even if it's not, automated, even if it's just something that you capture manually by hand? What is that right now?
Yes, there is. I can't tell you what it is at the moment because I don't know sufficient scope. It's one of the things on my table to go back and ask.
Okay.
Because we have things like, say, SRM, Site Reporting Manager as an example, but that tends to be focused more on sort of resource utilization.
Right. Okay.
Also we have BigFix.
Yeah.
We have Celestica has McAfee antivirus, and they also have carbon black. So that's feeding information back to Celestica, and we could actually ask them for that information as well.
So this
But
is,
then,
I'm assuming this is all information related to vulnerabilities and the like. Please correct. I don't think any of us are
oh
really
no, this
familiar.
is more application based. This is more telling us what this server's doing,
Okay, got
Okay.
it.
or
I see.
what's loaded on it.
Understood.
And we have a few other reporting tools, which I'm sorry I can't remember off the top of my head. But one of the things I have my note to do is to go back to
Mhm.
check with our my steady state team to find out from them, hey, what are the reporting agents which we have running here?
Got it. And would it be accurate to say that currently the state of the art is that some part of your team, some humans in your team, they basically monitor everything that comes out of these tools and then they take decisions based off of that?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
And the reason, and let me tell you the reason I'm asking you that question, right? Which is basically it's in order to figure out how to benchmark the output of an AI model, right? So this is something we've been dealing with in some work we've been doing on code translation previously as well, right? Which is the AI models, whatever models we're using, they are going to output their own confidences or probabilities on the set of outputs that they produce. Now, those numbers in and of themselves are useless for the domain expert, which would be the humans in your team, right? Those numbers are useless to them because they don't actually know how to baseline those numbers. So what we would need to do in some sense is figure out a way to correlate the output of the confidences of the AI model to the kind of telltale signs that your engineers are trained to pay attention to in the instrumented data that they are looking at. Does that make sense?
It does. And the
Mhm.
way that if I was building this, I might think about looking at this is to, if there are thresholds which the tool uses, so things which the tool is not highly confident about,
Mhm.
what about just walking the human through those examples? So then if let's say I'm moving 1,000 separate workloads, and the tool comes back and says 800 of these, I really know what's happening there. Okay, good. So what about the other 200? Well, now we get into degrees of uncertainty. Okay, so let's look at the ones which you're most uncertain about. Tell me, what are you seeing? Or what are you seeing which is creating uncertainty for you? A human may, for those, be able to go through fairly quickly. An example, maybe Windows is spelt incorrectly in terms of the operating system, and the person who also ended up spelling Windows incorrectly maybe that was part of the setup. When they first installed the tool, they said, oh, by the way, this is some information here. Maybe it's something like that. A human might be able to see, oh, I see what's happened. You've had some typos creep in. So literally, if I fix those typos in my data set, tell the tool to run again, I should see those go away. And then anytime you're building anything like that, it'd be really good to have the ability to baseline or to version something which comes out. Okay, we've run this about 10 times. We quite like that. Let's call this our version 1. We're going to baseline that. I'm going to type in a description. The tool automatically puts day and date in there for me. And now if I want to go back and compare, I can compare whatever I've got now back with that baseline. People do a lot of those things now, today, by hand, doing those types of comparison. Just the ability to do that, you've actually improved someone's day.
Okay.
Let's see. So the information in your spreadsheets, is it, do you convert things to kind of a numerical representation? Or, you said there could be comments and things, but I'm trying to imagine, like, you have rows and columns that correspond to kind of the system configuration things, and you put numbers in there, or I'm trying to imagine what that captured information ends up being.
So what I could do is I could go back to to my client project executive and my delivery project executive, and I could ask them, how do they feel about me sharing this information with you?
That would be great. I understand, mostly that people don't allow things like that. If they did, we'd love to see it. It would help. It would make it much more concrete. Oh yeah, so that's an example.
Yeah, so I would love to be able to share this, but as you said,
Yeah, yeah, we
it-
understand the sensitive nature of client information.
yeah,
I
so
see.
there's actually very little which is on here which I would call sensitive. So this name here is sensitive.
Mm-hmm.
That would be a sensitive thing.
Right.
The other types of information, maybe the address, you can tell here we're talking about this is where we're moving from.
Mm-hmm.
But
Mm-hmm.
an example, I'd started categorizing the headings here
Mm-hmm.
because Matt, my pivot tables were getting confusing. So I've
Yeah.
got, I added server name, address. Well, this field's useless, so I'm calling it useless. Look what it says. It's got Toronto. Okay, that's handy to know. DMZ, not Tor or Toronto, IBM. What the heck? So, we have sort of varying degrees of useful information here. Here's another column I've called useless. This
Mm-hmm.
empty column, I've given it a very descriptive name. It's called empty. So, I'm actually going through and I'm attempting to decorate this so I can get a grip on what's happening.
Right.
Because what I want to be able to do is ask some informed questions and then get my enable my steady state team to go and do some further thinking.
Mm-hmm.
And
So
so then we
this
get
list,
into,
yeah.
here's an example of, application type. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
it's an application. Thanks, team. Who the heck put that in there? It's kind of useless. But
Awesome.
over here, I find something a little bit more useful. And looking at this, see there's two here, this one here says ArcSight connector, but I've called that, in the app type, in column T, the app type is application, over here, ArcSight connector, but now down here, app type, ArcSight connector. It's an ArcSight connector. Well, if you knew this was an application of ArcSight, why the heck did you call it application here? So, those are the types of things
I see. So there's more sort of human discrepancies in how data is collected, how it's displayed in the spreadsheets, and then you have to kind of read the tea leaves to figure out what it really means.
Yeah. And then up here, we've actually got what appears to be 3 servers who are doing a similar type of thing, each one of them described in a different way. Infrastructure infrastructure directory, infrastructure server. Well, I know it's a server because this is a server row, and something called application. They're all part of Active Directory.
So can you imagine, like, does anyone ever visualize this in a different way, like kind of an image of a set of networked components, or like, is this the best way? Have you found that in the end, this is the way it has to be captured in?
So the way I would describe the way this is captured for a consumer who is not worrying about a row at a time is garbage. It's not very good. It should really be better. So here I was playing around with pivot tables. This is one of the ones so I had a couple which were crashing on me. Yep. And there I was trying to work out, how can I get some meaningful results out of this? So right now it's kind of meaningless. Okay, operating system, everything's all ones in terms of server count. What I really want to do is to figure out how to clump these together. That would be useful. So then I can look at something and say, okay, I've got so many applications. Of those applications, how's the operating system breakup looking like? Oh, now it tells me I've got a pile of different applications. But for instance, in this spread, in the pivot table is actually saying, well, you've got Windows 2008, and then you've got Windows 2008. By the way, thought you'd like to know, you've got Windows 2008-32 and Windows 2008 R2, and then Windows 2008 R2 x64, 32-bit Windows 2008. Windows 2. Oh, stop telling me about Windows 2008. Well, it's all Windows 2008 with small variations. So you could see just in this example here, we're kind of into the territory of big fail, I would say, because it's not really helping us to understand, to be able to have a conversation and say things such as, well, hell, look there, customer, you have, let me see, you've got 36 rather old servers. These are Windows 2008, and we can give you more detail if necessary. But those old servers are actually all supporting some critical aspects of your infrastructure, and those are Active Directory and say Citrix as an example. How to remotely access your system, and then the directory which controls everything. We probably think maybe it's a good idea, either before or after the workload migration, to actually upgrade that to something a little bit more 21st century, as opposed to being almost 13 years out of date and also no longer supported. So being able to have a conversation like that, and then say it's based on drill down, click, diagram type of thing, that is powerful.
Right, I can see. Okay, so the a lot of the decisions, because you're moving to a new infrastructure, you need to be able to have a conversation with the client about, okay, once you finally understand, here's what you have, then you need these kind of almost what if scenarios that you discuss with the client, with the different trade-offs of the kind of technology stack that it's going to be on, or
well, it's technology and applications.
Right.
So, and depending on what phase of the project or who you're talking to, you might be talking about maybe the focus is on technology, because you're talking to the director who is responsible for servers. He's an infrastructure director, and that's his focus. Conversely, you may be talking to the director of applications, and she's less concerned about servers, because that's just infrastructure. If I need more servers, you'll just spin it up for me. That's not important. What I'm interested in are the applications which service my business needs, and so I want to understand what those look like. And are there any risks? Well, actually, there's some of your core directory mechanisms or systems are actually running on Windows 2008, which is way, 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 as you know, past its best by date.
So different clients will have different particular needs in those areas, or major concerns.
Different parts of the client. Will
different
have
parts of the client.
And different IBM teams, and those IBM teams might be the same IBM team, but it may be the particular problem space which they're solving on that day is how they're looking at this.
That's amazing. I see we're at the end of our time. I will say you have given us a new level of understanding of the detail of what is involved in this process, and also some of the challenges that are kind of about trying to understand what's there. Steve's, I think, calls it software archaeology when you try to understand.
That's a good way to describe it.
What is this? And that is not an easy question. The teams that put it together may not be there. They're working with very small teams. There could be, maybe they're overbooked if they're small teams. So having people coming in trying to learn this information, it's hard even to get their time. And then doing what if scenarios about what the future could be. So and this is lift and shift. This isn't making any changes to the core functionality. This is this is a case where some things are trying to be held steady.
We would like to, I would say quite often, we would like to be able to make changes. So we'd like to be able to do some form of application modernization in the middle of that lift and shift.
Yep.
But generally speaking, no one's going to touch a barge pole.
Yeah, I can understand. You can't have all moving parts. Yeah.
Yeah, but sometimes part of that is because, well, we don't know how fast it performs. Why
Mhm.
not? Well, client won't let us log into it to create a baseline.
Mm.
Okay, so if we had an idea of how fast it was performing, do you think we would attempt to do some modernization in the middle?
Mhm.
Not sure. So, you know, there are things which we don't have a straightforward and effective and fast method of getting
Right.
that information. So
Right.
maybe we're not going to touch it. On the other hand, maybe we have someone who, hey, I need to sell me some red hat. So I'm going to come in and say, oh yeah, we'll just lift and shift all of your Windows workloads onto OpenShift containers, and it's going to be really awesome. And then they run into the client architect or the customer architect that then starts saying, wait a minute, where's the benefit to me of just putting what are already existing VMware containers inside of OpenShift containers? How does that benefit me? You know,
Right.
what does that do that's good for me at the moment? And then the danger is, unless the OpenShift person had some good homework and some good reasoning behind that and some good insight, it could be an uncomfortable conversation.
Mm. Right. So having systems that can make explanations well of why a design matters is also important to be able to. Yeah, and you're saying there's a sales agenda there. So
In that case, there was definitely a sales agenda. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Well, I
Which is
really
fine is
yeah.
fine if the whole team is told that to start with.
Mhm.
Okay, we see what's happening here.
Mhm.
We will adjust our thinking to help support, and that's how we're going to do it, because we understand. What you don't want to do is to have it sold to you as the IBM team presented, oh, this is going to be so awesome and it will do the following. And then as you start to get further and further into it, you start to kind of think, whoa, hang on a minute. How's this helping us?
Well, I really appreciate the real world scenarios you've given us because, you know, sometimes when we think about this, it's easier, it's sort of we're thinking in sort of terms of tools and data, but you've represented how things can get kind of fuzzy with people and maybe the needs to iterate on a plan. It's something that requires a lot of thinking and comparing different scenarios, and that helps us to think better about tools in the future. So thank you very much for spending time with us, Justin.
No problem. My pleasure.
Thanks, Justin. Thank you, Justin. Yeah.
We'll be in touch. Thank you.
Okay, thanks a lot. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye, guys.